So after I released the previous episode, the one where I talked about the dents and bulges in the hull, some of you asked, well, what about the deck? Does that bulge as well? And I honestly couldn't answer because I hadn't noticed. So when I got down here, I took a look, and lo and behold, the deck has a lot of bulges as well. You can see one going from around here to here. Some of them are over shorter distances, but we have these fairly large ones. But I don't know how visible they are. Doesn't seem to be very easy to see on the screen, but with the naked eye, they're definitely there. And it starts here. Further back, there are none. But here they start, have some fairly short ones here, and progress up here, and then you have the large ones above this piece of deck, and then they're a bit more visible up here. You can see here's a low spot above along this line, and a high one that goes back here, so this entire space here is higher than that back there, but none of them go across the deck. It's always along the deck. Well, the bulges are across, but we don't have any bulges in this direction. So yeah, I find it hard to believe that would be contraction from the welding that causes this, because we have some fairly long welds going from, well, starboard to port with, well, a bit less than a meter in between. So there are a lot of them, and they span the entire deck. So that should give some issues as well, and I don't see that at all. The lengthwise ones might still have something to do with the contraction after welding the deck, but it might also not. So yeah, in short, the deck has bulges as well. Yeah, I was quite annoyed that it wasn't possible to see the dents and bulges on the recordings, the videos, but I thought, maybe if I project some black and white stripes onto the hull, then it might be possible to see it. When I move these stripes back and forth here, you can see some of them shrink and grow. That should be visible. And, well, that's because the hull changes. So it's very, very visible to the naked eye here, but, well, with the naked eye, I don't need the stripes to see that something's going on. Just like with the deck, I didn't need stripes to see that as well once I was looking at it. Anyway, I hope this makes the problem visible for you guys. As per usual, I have to start with a bit of cleanup. For some reason, I always seem to delay that until the mess really gets in the way. I guess it's because there's usually more interesting stuff around to do. You could call it a character flaw. My wife, though, she just calls it annoying. With the cleanup out of the way, I turned my attention to the liner in the port side of the saloon. I want to be certain that the condition of the hull in the port side is the same as on the starboard side. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to be reasonably sure about the cause of the issues. I started out by grabbing the multi-cutter and a new blade in order to cut the liner along the cuddy. I know that the liner continues behind the cuddy, so it's either doing that cut or removing the cuddy, which hasn't been emptied out yet and will probably resist just as much as the starboard one. So let's see if a new blade doesn't do wonders for the cutting process. For once, I'm going to leave the cutting at real time, just because I was so impressed myself by how easy it went. With the trim gone, it was time to start digging for screws. Tedious work, but still easier than trying to rip everything apart with all the screws still in place. Then comes the usual ceremonial attempt to get all the uncovered screws out, knowing full well that I'll have missed some and that some are going to be stuck permanently. Which all leads to the satisfying payoff, using the persuader and brute force to do the rest of the gentle deconstruction. And rinse and repeat for the next panel. Finally some cleanup, and we're once again down to all the foamy goodness covering the inside of the hull. After some chop, chop, chop and a lot of dust, we finally get access to the hull itself. A good thing we're more than halfway done with all the liner and the insulation. The red patch here is rust. It seems that two different paints were used. The grey one we've seen so far, and then this red one. Both have held up equally well on the upper part of the hull and equally well, or well, poorly depending on your point of view, on the lower part of the hull. So I intended to remove the other old cuddy today, but yeah, I created a lot of debris the other day, and well, someone parked a water slide right next to Ophelia. Yeah, that's not something you see every day. A build-it-yourself water slide, complete with everything. I even think there's the big pump used to circulate the water. Yeah, unfortunately, that means I can't get the trailer in here so I can remove all the crot I made, so that'll have to wait. I'll find something else to do down there though. What do we know? Yeah, this is the small debris problem I was talking about. And well, back there as well. So I really need to get rid of that before I can do anything about that cuddy. So instead, I think I'll be pulling out this wall and, well, if I have the time, start pulling this apart. The recipe in the Galley is pretty much the same for the other liner panels. There are a few twists though. First of all, I left some pieces of the old cupboards in place. They seemed quite stuck, and at the time I didn't need to look behind that part of the liner. Rather than trying to get the brass screws out, I decided to switch to a bimetal blade and just cut through them. I had to relearn the technique with cutting a bit of workspace around the screws though. Otherwise the cutting part of the blade tends to get stuck and you get nowhere with a lot of noise. One of the reasons I left those pieces in place the first time around was that everything was both screwed and glued in place. So once the screws were cut, it was time for the persuader to do some work. Other parts seemed to be stuck on with glue, which did hold on surprisingly well, but they could be gently convinced to let go. Before any of you hurry down in the comments section and write something about a bigger hammer, I don't think that would be useful here. There's hardly room to swing the one I've got. have to admire how solid everything's put together on Ophelia. Things often let go in far larger pieces than I expect. Tearing Ophelia apart, I seem to spend a lot of time considering what to do and how to do it, rather than actually doing things. But from what I gather, that's just the nature of the beast called boat work. I thought that the wires in the galley had been pulled behind the liner, but it appears that I didn't look closely enough. This kind of hidden wiring, though, nicely done as it is, was exactly why I wanted to disconnect the old electrical system, especially the 220 volt part, and I wanted it disconnected completely. Creating random shorts without being aware of them doesn't strike me as a particularly good idea. I couldn't find a way to get hold of the liner, so I decided to just cut it in two. It turned out that the problem was that I wasn't dealing with a single piece of liner. This part was actually two stacked layers of plywood. Yeah, nice and black. Perhaps it's time to put on the mask. This is probably pretty nasty. After cutting the top layer of plywood, I got out one of the lower sheets, but it turned out that the inclined top piece held the other ones firmly in place. There's no way to get a grip of the top piece and no visible screws either, so I cut a slot for the crowbar to go into and then forced it out. And would you know it, it turns out that the reason for the lack of visible screws was that this piece was nailed in place. Yeah, that's pretty bad. It's been wet. Oh, it actually still is wet. With the top piece gone, getting out the rest of the liner was fairly simple. I didn't even need the persuader. While the parts of the liner and the reflective paper that was furthest from the companionway and the corner of the housetop looked fine, the parts closer to the companionway looked more iffy. Beyond discoloration of the paper and the foam, there was also some odd black spots and splotches in the foam, very likely mold, something I haven't seen elsewhere on the boat so far. Don't get me wrong, I've seen plenty of mold elsewhere. For instance, when I tore out the pilot berth, there was a lot of it, but I haven't seen it growing on the foam. Another round of chop, 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 and we got to the hull. And it seems fairly evident beyond the wet plywood that Ophelia's water issues stem from this area. There's hardly any paint left due to rust, and it's not that the corrosion goes deep, it's just all over the hull under the leaky house where the galley used to be. Yeah, I think that's all I'm gonna have time for right now, because I need to start editing this video, but I want to get rid of that next week, so I should probably contact the ones with the water slide. Fortunately, I have a pretty good idea who it is, and see if they can remove it so I can, well, remove all this. And then I was also thinking that I might pull off the winches, because, well, there's no need to have them exposed to the elements when they could be back at the workshop. So that was it for this time. If you like what I do, or think that I could or should do things differently, please leave a comment below so I can see what you're thinking and maybe learn from your experience. You could also join my Patreon if you want to support this project directly, and please do hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, so you don't miss out on another round of boat deconstruction. Thank you for tagging along, and I hope I'll see you again next time.